In the last section, we started working on our k nearest neighbor algorithm, and we just have a couple more steps, so let's keep at it. We've now done our slice to consider only the top k records. The next thing we have to do is look at those top k records and figure out what the most common output, or the most common label, actually was. Now, in this case, you and I can look at this output right here and say, clearly 4 is the most common. But actually writing some code to tell the computer how to actually read that can be just a little bit challenging. So believe it or not, we still have to go through a couple other steps to count up the number of 4s, or the number of buckets that we see inside of here, and return the largest value. The first in this process of figuring out which bucket has the most common occurrence, or the most greatest frequency, we're going to use the countBy helper method from Lodash. CountBy is used to count up the number of records that match some given criteria. So in our case, we want to count by and somehow group together all the second elements inside of these inner arrays right here. So we're going to pass this thing to countBy, and then we're going to get back an object that has a couple of different key value pairs. The keys of this object are going to be the values, or the unique values, that are seen inside of this array. And so in this case, our unique values in the second index, or the second position here, are 4 and 1. Then the values, so the other side, is the number of times that each of those values, or each of those unique elements over here, occurred. So in this case, the element 4, or the number 4, showed up 2 times, because here it is right here, and here it is right here. And then the element 1 showed up 1 time. So the result of countBy is going to be an object with 4, 2, and 1, 1. Let's add in this step right now, and we'll figure out how to go from there. Okay, so over here, we're going to add on our .countBy, and we need to give this thing some criteria of how it's going to somehow count up all the different records here. And so the criteria is going to be the second element in each of these inner arrays. So I'll put in row at 1 like so. And now you can see there's that object. So the key is the value that was seen in the original array, and then the value is the number of times that it occurred. And so we also saw 4 2 times. Now, once again, you and I can look at this object, and it's very easy for you and I to say, oh yeah, 4 is the most common occurrence. So clearly this ball, if we drop it from position 300, is going to drop into bucket 4. Once again, actually writing out some code to tell the computer to find that 4 and return it is just a little bit challenging. So just a couple more steps. So the next thing we're going to do is call another method called toPairs. toPairs is going to take that object, and it's going to take each of those key value pairs and return them as an array of arrays, just as we had previously. So we're now going to have an array that says bucket 4 occurred 2 times, and bucket 1 occurred 1 time. So let's do that right now. I'll add on toPairs. Okay, there we go. Bucket 1 occurred 1 time, and bucket 4 occurred 2 times. Now the next thing we're going to do is another sort by. So we're going to sort from least to greatest using the second element as our sorting criteria again. So that means that the bucket that was used most commonly, or showed up most frequently, is going to end up at the very end of this array. So I'll do another sort by. I'll get my row, and I'll return that second element inside there again. So now I see that bucket 4, which occurred 2 times, is at the very end of this sorted array. So all I need to do now is get the last element inside of this overall array. To get that last element, I'll use a very appropriately named method called last. So last is going to return the last element in this big outer array, which in this case is going to be 4 and 2. So then I'll do my .last. So now I get just 4 and 2. And then I'll do kind of the opposite of the .last. I can call .first, and I get the first element out of that inner array. So now I know that the most common bucket that's closest to other observations for 300 pixels is bucket number 4. There's just one last little thing to take care of here. You'll notice that when we print this out, it has the quotes around it. So this is just a little technicality, but when we use that count by step to put all of our records into that object, technically those keys were turned into strings. Now in our case, bucket 4 really needs to be like the number 4 and not string 4. So to get a number out of this right here, I'm going to add on just one last step, a parse int, like so. And that returns truly the number 4. So then the very last thing is add on a value, which terminates our entire chain. All right, so that's it. That is k-nearest neighbor algorithm, put together more or less from scratch using the Lodash library. I know that going through this process probably seemed really confusing. I know I added in a lot of kind of confusing steps here, but this is probably one of the most concise implementations of k-nearest neighbor that you're going to see just about anywhere around. So it's a very concise implementation that is generally pretty easy to follow if you understand how Lodash works. All right, so let's take a quick pause right here. When we come back to the next section, we're going to take this implementation and move it over to our code editor and run it inside of our Plinko project. So quick break, and I'll see you in just a minute.